Welcome back, everybody. David Carr here of the Business Roundtable Podcast. I'm grateful to be back for another week. We have a brand new guest here on the Roundtable. I'm very excited to share with you. For those of you listening for the first time or just checking in, my name, again, David Carr, Steward Your Business, where I help organizations and their teams come together to accomplish great things. And so I love working in the people space. And that's why I got Craig on here, because he works in the people space. Specifically in the recruiting space and bringing in top talent. And I'm going to let him share more about his background in a minute. But I thought we'd have a great conversation in our current environment of finding key talent and which Craig's an expert on. And then how do we retain that talent in the organization? So Craig, I want to welcome you and just give it open to share with our audience. Since you're new to our audience, we have kind of returning guests, but you're new. So please take a couple of minutes here just to share with our audience who you are and your background.
Sure. Craig Leach, Wichita, Kansas, and got into executive recruiting 4 years ago. I will tell you, I probably started recruiting many years before that. Just wasn't on my business card, right?
Yeah.
And as you're building businesses and scaling companies, and I loved my roles, my executive roles, where you're thinking strategically all the time, what's coming, what goals and objectives you have, and then always looking, hey, who do I have in place that can then help with these objectives? If I don't have the talent, where do I find it?
Mm-hmm.
And so I always kept this whiteboard, if you will, of every time I met somebody that had a particular skill set, I would make sure I made a note of that, followed them, built a relationship with them, and enjoyed discovering people's talents. And so when I decided to step out into the world of executive recruiting, I wanted to approach it from the standpoint of how do strategy and people, like the scales of justice, and it has to be in balance. You can't execute strategy and vision without having the right talent around you. If you're not good at strategy and vision, if you have that A talent, you won't have them for long because they'll find somewhere else that can provide that. So it's a challenge, and I think it's something that resonates with me that, to be able to execute, you've got to have a daily focus on the talent around you, whether you have to go outside of the business or whether you can develop it internally.
Yep.
Both, I think, are important. So
yeah, absolutely.
That's what got me here.
Yeah, I'm super excited, and you're so humble because I know you've had so much experience in business and working, like you said, through this corporate world, and then now started your own firm specializing in recruiting. But I just want to reemphasize what you just said, that this talent is the lifeblood of the organization, and that how do we, I'm excited to dig deeper into how do we attract and retain that top talent, especially when it's a competitive market right now, when you're trying to find key, employees, or have a choice a little bit more right now, especially with top talent, where they want to go, where do they want to be. So while we get into that, I'd love to hear your perspective. Like you said, you've been in the industry for a long time. You've been now running your own firm for 4 years. What's the landscape look like in recruitment? How does that change, or how is it the same? Maybe how has it looked since maybe the last decade or so?
I think that's been one of the challenges is recruitment has always been the same. I guess, the one thing that, I get asked all the time, hey, we work with a recruiter, what makes you any different? And that really stuck with me. And the recruitment process, there's certain things that are changing, new technologies, things of that nature. But I think it's where you focus initially, because the people equation is so important and so vital to every organization, regardless of size. That I take my recruitment and focus not on the job at hand so much, or filling a role next week, we really need to start 2 years out.
Mm.
And we need to focus on retention up front versus, hey, now we've got this individual in here. How do we keep them? Let's uncover that and discuss that first before we start recruitment.
Mm.
And,
Yeah.
there's a 90% of people who are fired or leave a job within the first year. It isn't because of their technical ability. It's not because of their skill sets. It's not because of their performance. 90 some percent of the time, it's behavioral.
Mm-hmm.
The dreaded, you're not a culture fit.
Mm-hmm.
So why don't we address that day one? And if there's areas that we want to explore deeper with a candidate, we get that out now versus day 365.
Oh yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Well, I liked what you said. One of the things you said was thinking about the strategy like 2 years ago, or thinking a little bit more about, and it just triggered in my mind when you said that, Craig. I worked with a company at one point, very large company. I think they had about 5,000-6,000 employees at one point. And for whatever reason, I can't remember the exact reason, but they paused their active recruitment of younger engineers, right? And they didn't see that lag effect until, like you said, a year or two later, where they were growing the company and they didn't have enough people to do all the work, because they kind of stopped, they paused, and they weren't thinking
Sure.
about, oh, we kind of got enough people, and then they realized, oh, we have to be constantly recruiting, like it never ends, it doesn't stop, right?
It can't. It just can't.
Mm-hmm.
And it takes a dedicated focus to develop and foster that mindset.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Another thing you mentioned was kind of preparing. What's that retention look like? And one thing I work with clients right now, where they're not, they I know they're going to need people. They're going to hire people like you, Craig, to help them in the recruitment places, because that's what I don't do that, but I do get them prepared for what I call kind of the storm of change of bringing somebody new into the organization and saying, be prepared. Even how would this person be successful? How would they get plugged in? Thinking, like you said, what are it's both, and like you said, it's retention and recruitment. You got to be thinking about both of those things, because it's not either or, right?
It isn't. One thought that comes to mind is everybody's concerned about when you're actively in the recruitment process, what's their background? What have they done?
Mm-hmm.
I think that's important. It is important. Past performance is an indicator of future performance.
Right.
But everybody talks about background, and one thing I like to bring up with a hiring manager or a CEO or a president of a company is background is important, but let's talk about foreground.
Mm.
What's coming? What's
Mm-hmm.
going to help you retain somebody? And there's a common thing that your top performers are always looking for. It's clarity of vision, how they can make an impact, and how they're going to grow personally and professionally.
Mm.
So let's address that in the job description. Let's forget about a lot of the standard. I hope I don't offend any HR professionals, but most job descriptions are very HR based. You must
Yes.
be able to lift 50 pounds. Must be able to stand for periods of time. Well, that's great, and that needs to be included. And I know there's a reason why we do that, but also, when I'm sitting down and we're discussing a search and how we're going to build the search, it's about I'll take them a year ahead. Hey, this is day 365. We're sitting down with this employee on their first annual review. What will they have accomplished?
Mm-hmm.
And you're going to say to them, hey, David, you've been outstanding. You've done everything we've asked. Define that, because
Mm-hmm.
that's how I'm going to recruit. Here's what you're going to be doing. Here's what needs to be done. Here's what problem you can solve for them.
Right.
So a lot of people, that's a that's a tough ask to define that.
Yeah. Well, I think because they're not probably doing it themselves, like you said, Craig. So it's like, how could you have somebody else do it if you're not clear on the casting the vision and what's the win here? Then you're gonna have a really tough time having somebody come in and be successful, right?
Right. Exactly.
You
Exactly.
know. Um, so I'm curious. Yeah, because one of the things you brought up here was we've got different generations now too that motivate them, right?
Hmm.
And so as you said that, it makes me think, I mean, I've seen it more in the, I don't say Gen Z or millennials being very clear, like, I want to know, what does this company stand for? What are you about? Which was a different motivator for some others generation. I'm the Gen X generation. That still is meaningful for me, but it just seems different. What can you speak to, recruitment, particularly across these different generations right now
Yeah, absolutely. Because it's a challenge. Uh, it's a fun challenge.
Mm-hmm.
And so one of the things I've learned, if you're going to call somebody, call a boomer. They'll answer the phone. They'll pick it up. They don't care. They'll answer it.
They'll answer it.
Um, Millennials are in some ways that way. Uh,
Hmm.
they'll answer the phone. I'd prefer an email, but I'll get on the phone. Uh, Gen Z, they don't want to. That phone is not a phone; it's a computer. And don't call me. Um, Texting is fine. They love text messages. Let's have a few text messages and then maybe a phone call.
Hmm.
Uh, so that's different. One of the challenges that I see today, across all industries, is there's a current leadership vacuum.
Hmm.
Boomers are exiting the workforce at a rapid pace. Uh, Gen X is probably in senior leadership roles at this point, if that's where they're at in their career.
Mhm.
They're not looking to make changes. They've got one eye out the door. They're
Mm.
preparing the final steps to reach retirement.
Mhm.
Uh, Millennials are starting to move into those senior leadership roles, um, but still not ready to take over a division or a company. They just need a few more years yet.
Yep.
Um, Gen Z is probably one of the more difficult um, generations to deal with. It just seems to me that they don't have. I'm a Gen Xer too, right? So they don't have that drive to, hey, I want to advance and jump these levels and reach the pinnacle. They're more interested in the experience. What am I
Mhm.
going to be doing? What impact am I going to be having? I don't want to lead teams. I don't want to manage. Um,
Hmm.
I want. They're more open to looking at different careers,
Mhm.
not staying in one industry segment. What can I do to make an environmental impact? What can I do to make an impact on people? What can I experience
Mm.
versus how soon can I lead a team? What's the next step after that? So that's been a challenge.
Yeah.
And I think it's just part of their age right now. I mean,
Yeah.
we were at that age too,
Yep.
and I'm sure things will change.
Mhm.
They'll
Mhm.
change that, but today that's a little difficult. The career progression for them is not as important as the experience.
So it sounds to me what you're saying. I mean, as far as just pure numbers of people, right? Gen X is, correct me if I'm wrong. I mean, we're the smaller group. As
Yeah.
far as the population, right? So you have, like you said, these Gen Xers. The Boomers are leaving with the leadership. You've got Gen Xers have that, but then there's a smaller group, and they're a little bit more stepping out. And then you've got these millennials that are coming in. So to me, what I and this is kind of what I'm. You can affirm or if this is my understanding of what I'm seeing in the marketplace and why I started Steward Your Business was that very thing, Craig. Like you're saying, there's a gap there. So rather than for me personally working for a company, I realized I could have more of an impact working with multiple companies that need that leadership development, guiding their team because it's hard, especially now if you are the boomer, you've left, or you're the Gen X, you're the where the buck stops. I don't have enough hours, I don't have enough time in the day to take care of all the things to run the business. And so how do I do that obviously recruiting is one of them. You got to try to hire some talent. But what maybe I can't, in the meantime too, working with somebody like myself, it's a stopgap to a certain degree of like, I can help come in part-time as a consultant for you, but you're looking for a long-term position to fill that. So I see what you're saying, Craig, is like there's this void right now, and making sure that this leadership is passed on or developed really with the millennials, sounds like in particular, so that they would, we'll have to see how the Gen Zs start to step into things over time. Obviously, we don't know yet, but the millennials too are kind of feel like being maybe stretched a little bit more to lead in. They definitely have experience. They've been around, but maybe just not as much, and they don't have anybody else to lean on unless they intentionally are like looking for outside mentorship.
Right. Right.
Knowing that there's this diversity out there, Craig, how have you worked with companies to be, I don't know, inclusive, intentional about these different motivations, expectations, right? How do you educate business owners, especially if they're like about Boomer Gen X, and like, okay, hey, you mentioned earlier about the job description, that's the HR one, but how do we make it, some of them want more flexibility in their work schedule. Want to have this, it's just challenging to run the business. You're like, well, I need this. So how have you guided business owners in this challenge?
Yeah, for me, I always, when I work with either an existing client or even a new client, that the toughest part of this recruitment will be me interviewing you. And I think that process, that exercise really helps them define and think about how they want their culture to be defined, to be able to better define what they're looking for, what particular challenges or problems they have that they want somebody to be able to help and assist with. One of the big challenges is now it seems to be a pandemic in itself. Everybody really wants this remote flexibility, whether they're a boomer or whether they're Gen Z. And I have a hard time. With how we fit. Everybody is so concerned about culture. It doesn't matter the size of the company. Culture is extremely important. No bigger proponent of that than myself. But how with the increase in acceptance of remote and hybrid, how do we develop and foster culture when we're not together? What's that look like? That's a whole new class in college, right? I think there's a whole new discipline here of how we navigate that. That's a challenge.
It is
for all businesses, all sizes. When I tell candidates and I work with candidates, they say, "Hey, what would make me a top candidate?" One, able to relocate, and second, that you're willing to go to the office versus work remote. That will set you apart in the marketplace today.
Interesting. Yeah. I mean, I share your sentiments, Craig, on all those levels of, and I work actually with that's one thing I do work with business owners, like you're saying, is how do we get that engagement in this hybrid remote way? And it takes a lot of intention. It's not accidental by any means. You have to be very intentional. It can be done, but you have to think, like you said, strategically about this. You could do it well, or you could do it not so well. I mean, I worked for a company and they just said, "We'll just go in the office," and I'm like, "But nobody else is there, or I'm not working with anybody." So I could go to the office, but I could do the same thing here. But if I'm going to the office or going for a week-long meeting because there's a whole bunch of meetings set up, and specifically I'm going to meet with certain people, absolutely can be very powerful. Or having a company retreat, right? An experience like maybe the Gen Zs want, like, hey, I'll come to an experience and something that's lasting, and we have all the workshop and sessions, and it's like, okay. So there, it's kind of thinking a little differently, but I think I agree with you, Craig. There is absolutely value in coming together, coming in person, having that. There's a time and a place. We kind of went one extreme. Everybody don't come in, stay away. And then we said, okay, well, maybe we come back. And then we've had some extremes where the people are saying, come in 5 days a week, Monday through Friday, 8 to 5. And some people are like, oh, whoa, that's a little bit too much. So where's that middle ground? I don't know exactly. And I think it depends on like you said, the company and the culture, right?
That's right.
But I appreciate your recognition of these, or not recognition, but just you stated clearly, hey, if you can relocate and if you're willing to come in office, you're going to be more valuable to an organization, right?
Absolutely.
So don't be so rigid, maybe, is what I'm hearing you say, is be flexible in that regard. If you're really looking for this opportunity to grow and build this relationship with a company, be willing to relocate, be willing to go in the office and explore what that looks like. But I think that's positive to hear. That's what you're seeing in the marketplace right now, especially for those that live on the Business Roundtable podcast. We have business owners, we have leaders, directors, VP. We have different people on here that are sharing and learning, and so it's great to hear this, Craig, of what you're seeing right now. I'm in California. I love California, but California has been recruited away. There's a lot of different people recruited, like you said,
Yep,
to different places throughout the country. There's top talent here, which is sad for California, but good for other states that they're getting this.
Yeah, if there's a big change of what I've seen in just 4 years of solely focused on executive recruiting is the pandemic has been good in a lot of regards. A lot of good things have come out of that.
Mm-hmm.
Acceptance to, having conversations over Teams or Zoom. You don't have to travel as much, which lends to, affording a little more flexibility in your job. You don't have to spend 4 nights out every week if you're traveling or things of that nature. You can do this, maybe, cutting your travel budget by being able to hop onto a call with a customer. One of the other big things I've seen change is our cycle coming out of the pandemic.
Mm-hmm.
Rapid hiring frenzy. I mean, it was people were leaving for lateral moves, getting a $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 bump in pay for really doing the same thing. Mm-hmm. That's now kind of flip-flopped. I see a little more favor on the client side. We're not seeing moves for extravagant amounts of money for the same types of roles.
Mm-hmm.
And every market, every product has cycles. We're definitely in that cycle now. The last 60 days, I have seen a lot of increased activity in companies. I blame it on being an election year, but I've started to see a lot more. Hey, it's time. We've sat on our hands long enough. If we're gonna meet our company's goals and objectives, we've got to start finding the right talent now.
Right.
And that's the good thing for a candidate. For the A players, there's never a recession for good talent. It's our job as leaders to continually seek it out. And once we find it, we've got to be able to demonstrate how and why this new opportunity should appeal to you.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. One of the things we talked about when we met before the podcast, I really liked it because you and I are very passionate about some of the tools I was talking about, knowing yourself, like know yourself to lead yourself, and some of these things. And so I thought it'd be, if you're up for it, Greg, just briefly, one of the things you do, as a recruiter to help make sure that you're getting the right ideal candidate matched up with, the particular company. What are the things that you're looking for? Like you said, that kind of forward thing for them, but what should that candidate be looking for? How?
Yeah. So one of the things, kind of, answering that question again of what makes you any different,
Yep.
is that focus on retention.
Mm-hmm.
So, and knowing that behavior is a reason why most people uh, leave their role within the first year.
Mm-hmm.
Um, let's look at that first. So one of the things I use a company called McQuaig out of Toronto, Canada, that does a psychometric testing evaluation. We have, when I get a narrow handful of candidates, I have them complete a word survey that builds two profiles. One profile being their situational profile, which measures their characteristics and behaviors of who they think they have to be and how they think they're perceived in
Mm-hmm.
their current role. And then
Yep.
it also builds their natural profile.
Yep.
So that's great to know about a candidate, but I also have the clients do a job survey through McQuaig as well. And that builds a profile of the characteristics and behaviors that they feel that person should have for them to have success in that role. And I
Mm-hmm.
think it's great for both sides.
Yep.
It helps us identify quickly whether someone's a right fit behaviorally,
Mm-hmm.
something that we can add besides just looking, because technically you look at a resume and they say, boy, this is the perfect fit.
Yes.
We don't know all this softer side of things as
Right.
well.
Mm-hmm.
And this, it doesn't automatically exclude or include anybody. But
Mm-hmm.
if there's a difference in who they think somebody should be and who they are, if they
Mm-hmm.
can demonstrate, hey, I can do this because here's some, two or three hard examples of how it's not natural for me, but I can do it.
Right.
And I've seen people who are not matches for a role based on their behavior
Mm-hmm.
characteristics that were hired and are doing outstanding because we
Mm-hmm.
addressed it up front. We know how it
Right.
is. And it's also a great tool for, for that hiring manager
Yep.
use as a coaching tool. Hey, I've
Mm-hmm.
noticed a change in this employee's behavior. Maybe I need to, you know, pull them aside and just say, hey, how's things going? What are you working on? Is there anything I can help with? Um, just gives you a little, you know, the ability to look ahead a little bit and understand who somebody is. And that to me helps add to building and defining your culture.
Yeah, oh, 100%. I mean, that's my passion. I use a different framework. I told you about the five voices and others, but same thing. If I'm a candidate, or I'm considering myself, the better I know myself, my skills, where my strengths are, and where my struggle, like you said, Craig, it's just going to help you. If you can articulate that well, those dynamics is going to help you kind of be a filter for that opportunity. Like you said, hey, like I said, on paper it looks good, but based on the way they operate, it may not be a match culturally, the way the behaviors of that organization. I like how you do it. Like you said, you do it for the organization as well, not just the candidate, to see where that's a match. Because that's sometimes I think we forget that. We just look at these individuals, but we say this organization, this entity, if you will, this is how this entity behaves, and this is what it, not good or bad, it's just this is the way it is. And that may or may not match up with that candidate, right?
That's right.
Yeah.
This to me is just that's my differentiator. Is
Mm-hmm.
yes, it aids in our recruitment today,
Mm-hmm.
but it's really focused on that 1 year, 2 year anniversary of how we retain that employee. It's
Mm-hmm.
because we're investing up front in understanding who you are as a candidate, who we're bringing into the company, how we're going to work with you, develop you, and provide you a launch pad for your career and for yourself personally.
Right. Absolutely.
This isn't for everybody. I mean, it doesn't work with every client, and not every client wants to utilize it. Those are the ones I typically weed out too. Is like, hey, you know what? I would love to have job security because we're probably going to keep replacing people for you all the time.
Yep.
Hiring new people. I want to make sure for the candidate and for you get the best, absolute best situation for both parties.
Well, I think it's so important because, like you said, we talked last time we talked outside of the podcast was one of the things I mentioned to you. I'd work with recruiters in the environmental consulting world.
Mm-hmm.
And like you said, on paper, they matched. They said, yeah, they checked the boxes, but I could tell the recruiter didn't, like you said, understand the company culture. They understood the job description, like, okay, this is the job description, but like it didn't. I mean, we could literally sometimes we could just look at it, even though they had technically. I'm like, I could just tell based on their job history, where they worked previously, and some other elements. I was just like, this is not going to be a good fit. And I think, like you said, spending the extra time to get clear on this as an organization is really important. Like you said, doing that strategically and retaining your people, being really, really clear on this. I think sometimes businesses just want to skip over that somehow, and they think, it'll figure itself out.
Right. They're more interested in reducing the commercial downtime.
Mm-hmm.
Recruiting is expensive. Replacing an employee is expensive.
Mm-hmm.
I think sometimes, if it's $100,000 role, to replace that person probably has a 3x impact
Mm-hmm.
on the business. Might be hard to quantify that, but
Yep.
when you add in recruitment, you add in, the downtime, you add in cost of benefits, the sunk cost of compensation that you paid that employee, and now you have to do it over again and ramp up the training process. It's
Mm-hmm.
the dollars start to add up quickly.
They do. And I think they just sometimes they don't see it in that regard, like you're saying, Craig. But if the business owners can think that way, or at least bring in folks that, like yourself, to help them to see that and say, hey, here's how I can help you and help your team. I agree. It's because it can be a long process too. I was talking with a former colleague, and she was trying to hire a position, but she also recognized, I don't want to hire too quickly just to fill the position, because that could just backfire too. It's like I'm quote unquote solving the problem, not really solving the problem, because it's, like I said, not a good fit. So she held out for one position for, I think it was almost a year, trying to make sure, she had plenty of good candidates, quote unquote good candidates, come in, but she's like, culturally, it's not a good fit in the leadership structure. And because she was through that storm of having some other leaders in there and coming and going. So, hiring somebody like you, Craig, to help guide them through the process here and the pitfalls that might happen too, of, giving them counsel, right? And
Absolutely. I joke with my wife. I feel like a lot at the end of a lot of days, I've been more like Dr. Phil than I have been a recruiter. A lot of coaching, a lot of listening, but I think that's what separates, good recruiters from great recruiters
Mhm.
is being transparent, being open, what you're walking into. One of the things that I always work with clients on is we have to be very cognizant of the candidate experience, um, because it's a direct reflection upon you as a leader and how your business operates.
Mhm.
So let's set some expectations. One of the old metrics that people still use a lot is, well, what's your days to fill? How many days will it be before I have a candidate in place? And my response is that really depends on you.
Mm.
Is this urgent?
Mhm.
And can you commit? If you answer the question, is it urgent, and you answer yes, then okay, will you commit to 2 weeks from the day? You're blocking off the afternoon. We're going
Mhm.
to have 3 interviews. Block off the next week for a second interview,
Mhm.
a certain day and time.
Yep.
Can you commit to that?
Right.
If they say, hey, I can't commit to that, I'm too busy. Okay, well then I can't answer the days to fill. It
Right.
could take 60, it could take 90, it could take, a year. I don't know. It's up to you. How
Mhm.
fast do you want to do this, and can you commit? Um, that's what it's
That's a great perspective, Craig, because I think about that. If they're not thinking about, like you said, the commitment to make you going after this, what's the time involved, the frequency, the duration, the frequency that needs to happen, the reality check, like you said. I think they need to hear a reality check. It's not going to be, to do this right, to get the right people, kind of rough a timeline and amount of, as far as, hey, if you want this fast, like you said, well, we're going to have to set up, bi-weekly interviews, or I'm going to do court, whatever that, all the processes, right? So I don't, sometimes they think it's a wave of magic wand or something, and like, it'll just happen.
Right.
Like, what's the reality of the investment that you're going to make? I mean, this, like you said, recruiting is expensive. So we want to make sure that we're getting the most out of it and not just trying to rush through this and hope that we just kind of find the right person,
Hope is a bad tactic.
Is
important quality to have, but it's a bad tactic when it comes to recruiting talent.
Yeah, don't hope. Let's have a plan. Is there things that, like you said, I want to go back. I really like your idea of the strategy. And if there's things that kind of you can build into what I say, building future-proof recruitment or retention that businesses can be doing internally within their company and externally, the things you would recommend to start, hey, if you just started doing this today, what's it say? Like, build, planting the tree, right? When's the best day? 20 years ago. But if you do it now, what would they should be thinking about proactively doing to attract and retain top talent?
Transparency, number one. Regardless of level in a company, if it's an entry-level role or whether it's an executive role, people want to know how they fit into that. What impact am I going to have? Define that first and foremost before you start a job search or a recruitment. Be honest with yourself, where we're going and how we're going to get there. And the strategy is one thing. Then we come back to the tactics. How are we going to execute that? That will define who we're looking for. So in my process, I want to work through that and make sure that you and I, that, the hiring manager and I are fully aligned. So I one of the things that I dislike is, hey, let's send a test candidate over, or a candidate for alignment. Hey, yeah, they're 80% of what we're looking for, but we'd really like this. That's a waste of time. Let's define that up front so that when I present 3 candidates for your evaluation and interviewing, we know that they're going to be able to do the job. I make sure that they would accept the job, that they're in a place where they're able to accept if they want to, if it's aligned with their goals and strategies for their career. So transparency with yourself, number one, of understanding where you're going and strategically, and then how we're going to tactically recruit to meet those goals and objectives. The second thing is everybody's a customer, internal, external, everyone's a customer. We want to make sure we're a good company, that we do the right things, that we develop our talent, whether they are developed internally or whether we acquire somebody externally, that there's still a path for development. And even if there's a lot of companies I work with a lot of mid-sized companies, somebody that probably doesn't have a robust HR department, doesn't have a learning and development arm. So they need a lot of guidance and assistance. What do we need to do? How do we develop this? So having a lot of these things up front, transparency, working on strategy and tactics, treating everybody internally and externally as customers, builds culture and defines your culture. And then understanding what your purpose is and how that's going to appeal to people. in the market that's going to make my job easier.
Absolutely. If you're not clear on that, like you said, I mean, you hear it, but the vision, the mission, the values, are they just words on a piece of paper or on the wall, or do you live them? Do you breathe them? Like you said, do your clients experience them? Do you guys talk about this regularly? Are you clear on this, or is it muddled? And I think, like you said, if you have the transparency and the clarity of this, people are going to naturally, it's either going to attract or repel, hopefully in a good ways, right? You're polarizing to where this is who we are, and it's for the people that really get it, and the other people that don't, great. We God bless you, keep going, but we're not for you, right?
Right. Leaders shape culture, but your employees are the ones who define it. You can guide it as a leader. You can help develop it and perfect it. But your employees, they'll define your culture for you.
Yeah. Ask them, check with them, see what they know. Where are they at? What are they, like you said, what do they value? How do they show up? You've given us so many great things here, Craig, to think about, share. I know we could go deeper, but I wanted to I'm so glad you shared these points. And I hope that this episode gets people to start thinking a little bit more intentionally, more strategically, like you're saying, Craig, and if they're struggling, the beautiful thing about the Business Roundtable podcast, you could reach out to Craig. He's a top voice on LinkedIn. Actually, I love your content that you're putting out there, Craig. Every day you're going to find something out there, an insightful piece. And you can, of course, reach out to me. That's why we create the Business Roundtable podcast, as a way of creating value and sharing our knowledge and wisdom, so that you can say, hey, this is a guy that knows his stuff, that he can help me. And Craig's one of these guys with recruiting. So last thoughts, Craig, as we're kind of wrapping up the podcast, just as folks are, struggling, working their way through, recruiting and retention, just what would you, last bits of thoughts on this podcast today?
It's, working with recruiters is not for everybody. Find somebody. I think there's, that's one of the things about recruitment. There's a very low bar to hurdle to get into recruiting. I think working with companies or individuals that have a strong professional background, have been there, have sat in your seat, but now choose to focus on the biggest piece and most important piece of any business is its people.
Yeah.
And that's what I like to bring to the table. Let me play your general manager and find that 7th round draft pick that's a steal, and that everybody else overlooked, and maybe it's my philosophy. I guess I'd leave you with this: everybody's an A player. It's our job as leaders to make sure that they're in the right position to have personal and professional success.
Yes.
It takes effort. It takes work. Every day you have to work on that. If you increase your focus 10% in that area as a leader, I don't know. I wish I had a percentage of how much that would increase your business, but it'll pay off with great dividends.
Absolutely. Craig, thank you so much for being on the Business Roundtable podcast. It was a pleasure having you.
It's great to find somebody with the same philosophies and outlook on the people side of business.
Absolutely.
Thanks for having me, David.
You're so grateful. Again, for those of you listening or watching us on YouTube or catching us on LinkedIn, we appreciate your subscriptions, your comments, sharing this with others. If you found value in that, come back. We'll have another great episode next week. Until then, take care, everybody. Thanks for listening in. Thanks, Craig.
Thanks, David.